Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. My name is Joe, aka Joe the Wellness Curator, and this is the Obsidian Mindset Podcast, where we are redefining what wellness means to you. All right, now, first and foremost, it's June. We didn't have an episode last week, so this is the first time you've heard from me. So happy Pride to the folks of the LGBTQIA community. We see you out here. Let me give you a little snippet. Let me make sure y'all know. Wait, I'm not gonna sing. Be who you are for your pride. So for those that know, and for those that don't, now y'all know. I literally say that to a few of my friends, maybe a couple times a week, but in June it's a few times a day. But anyway. That was from a TikTok that goes around every June about a guy giving a cake for Pride to his best friend. But either way, the reason why we're here is we're here to do a special episode, two special episodes actually, for Pride to discuss an upcoming event that Obsidian Mindset is doing in collaboration with two dear friends of mine. So the first interview, the first episode today is hosting one of the hosts of the event, and it is Monroe Howard. So let me tell you a little bit about Monroe. First of all, before I even get into the bio, I'm really excited to have Monroe on. We've always had discussions about wellness. He's a licensed therapist, which I'll say again in the bio. But we have such deep conversations aligned when it comes to wellness and giving back to the community. And you'll learn that about our other host of this event, Tuan. And, it just gelled right together. So I just knew I wanted him on this episode, on this podcast. So, and no better time than to do it this month for Pride. So let me tell you about Monroe. Monroe Howard is a therapist, licensed master social worker, motivational speaker, and educator, best known for his work as a life coach and advocate for mental health awareness. He was inspired by his own diagnosis with major depressive disorder. He is driven to destigmatize mental health and promote the upliftment of the LGBTQIA, Black men and youth in particular. He continues this effort as a therapist in private practice in Maryland and Virginia, and as a part-time faculty counselor at Montgomery College. Okay, so that's the resume. That's the credentials. But I'm so excited that we're able to go into some deeper topics, talking about things from intersectionality to redefining wellness, particularly for the Black queer experience, to just talking about what it looks like to be a parent or a family member and to how to show up for a young Black queer child. It was really good. Please listen to this episode. Take notes. I'm going to leave some show notes about where to find him and his organization, Black Queer Healing Spaces. And to give another little plug, Obsidian Mindset is going to be partnering with Monroe and the Black Queer Healing Space, as well as Tuan, and you'll hear his interview next time. And we're doing we're starting a group called Hubu, Healing Us by Us. And the purpose of Hubu is to create a safe space for the Black LGBTQI community by creating events, forums, and resources. Although healing is in the foundation of Hubu, community, fun, networking, and collectivism are also interlaced in what we have to offer. So that's who we are. That's the overarching group, Hubu. Now, what are we about? So what we're about to do is our first event on June 24th. Super excited, 1:30 to 3 p.m. if you're in the DMV area. It's in the Northwest. And I'm really excited to have this event. We're going to be talking about wellness while being Black and queer, what that looks like. This is a part of our long series. It's called the Healing Space Series. It's going to be a free event, so feel free to show up and to RSVP an Eventbrite link, which will be in the show notes. This will be an experience where we are not only having some discussions, so Obsidian Mindset, myself, Joe the Wellness Curator, will be moderating some discussions about what wellness looks like, especially while being Black and queer. Then we'll have some discussions with Monroe, who will be our residential licensed therapist, and we'll be going a little bit deeper about not only his journey, but talking about what it looks like in general. And you'll also get some clips and some snippets of what that sounds like in this episode today. And lastly, and I think this is I think I'm excited because I haven't done this in a while, is we'll have Tuan, who is our residential yogi. He'll be bringing us to the journey. He's the Neo Soul King when he does his yoga. He'll be bringing us on a journey of meditation and yoga, and it'll be done through a phenomenal experience. Trust me. Trust me. So this is not something you'll want to miss. So this event is targeted for those that identify as male. So this is black, gay, queer, bisexual, trans men. And of course, this is a healing space series. So if this goes well, you know what? I'm going to manifest. It will go well. We're going to focus on our next couple, which will be focusing on other groups. So again, this is the Healing Space series, Wellness While Black and Queer. This is going to be on June 24th at 2000 at 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. It's going to be the location and all the details are going to be in the Eventbrite link in the show notes. And this is going to be a great time. So hang in there. Stay with us for the interview with Monroe. It's going to be amazing. And make sure you tell folks about the event. If it's not for you, tell your people. If it's not for your people, at least have all y'all follow the IG. At least. And that's a shameless plug for me. All right, y'all. Stay tuned and listen to this great interview. Oh, one more thing. There were some technical difficulties, but I wanted to keep a lot of what Monroe said. So I'm just going to plug in this one section that he really started off the episode with amazingly. And I think it really sets the ground and the foundation about what this episode is going to be about. So instead of complaining and instead of me just deleting the episode or deleting the segments because they don't make sense, I'm going to rock with it. I'm going to roll with it. And I'm going to make sure that you get the full experience of what it was like to speak with Monroe about these topics. So enjoy that. Excuse the technical difficulties, but enjoy the rest of the episode. All right, y'all.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think a lot of what you were, throwing out there is all, again, like can be polarizing in terms of obviously now just in terms of what's happening in terms of anti-trans legislation in this country. The first thing that comes to mind with me is like redefining wellness is just actually even letting folks be human, exist.
Mm.
And so when you talk about at like wellness is just fundamentally somebody's acknowledgement of your existence. And we are finding in so many instances, like blatantly in your face, like I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm gonna shout it on the mountaintops. You ain't Can we cuss on here? I
You
don't know.
sure can. You sure
Okay,
can.
you ain't shit. Like
Mm.
you don't exist, or I wish you didn't exist, or I am going to do everything that I can do to eradicate your existence. Like so, when you think about wellness, I'm like, damn, we can't even fundamentally, or our trans brothers and sisters can't even fund, particularly primarily Black trans women who are
Mm.
disproportionately affected by all of this, but like can't get the acknowledgement of the existence, right? Of just being human, right? In that. And then when we talk about, I choose our Black trans women because there is this dual fight,
Mm-hmm.
both outside of the community and within the community, because of the overlay of religion and ideology, there is a rejection of their humanity within the Black community. So it's like they're fighting on all fronts, which then kind of puts me into the other space that I wanted to say in terms of wellness in the LGBTQIA plus community really does deal with intersectionality.
Hi. I
Hi.
realized we didn't even start with that last time. How are you doing? How
Listen,
was your
I'm here and
present?
I'm present. I am clear. I am present. Yes.
That's what's up.
I was looking forward to this conversation. So yeah.
Thank you. All right, so I guess we can start off this time about what do you do and how is that? How does wellness play into what you do?
Yeah,
What?
well, wellness is my jam.
Yes.
Uh, no, I'm a licensed master social worker and a licensed psychotherapist. I'm located here in Washington, D.C., but I serve the DMV. So the entire state of Maryland and Virginia, including the District of Columbia.
Oh, nice.
I see clients throughout those areas in private practice. So proud to say I'm part of an all Black private practice, Hearts and Mind Counseling. Yeah. So
Oh,
yeah, that's what I do. I do some other things. I have some contracts in California and New York that I work on some with some nonprofit organizations doing some great work in a lot of similar capacity, but more so on a kind of a coaching capacity and capacity building for individuals. I'll do that. And then I teach part time in the faculty advising, counseling, and advising department at Montgomery College. So
I know
listen,
that's right.
I'm an entrepreneur. So listen, all kind of bags
I
to be
was like multiple streams of income
listen,
and
and
impact. Multiple streams of
well,
impact.
thank you, brother. I appreciate it is it's no joke, man. It's no joke because I mean, you know, it's a blessing to be able to do a myriad of things that I do feel passionate about and I feel are impactful in the way in which I can contribute. But it's a hustle and never let that not be acknowledged. It is a hustle.
Just throwing it out there.
Yes.
So how did you know that you want to get into licensed therapy or being
This
a licensed therapist?
I didn't want to become a clinician. This is a second career of mine. I worked
Oh.
in K-12 education for 15 years prior to this. And I went to graduate school while pursuing a master's in social work. I did a dual master's. So I did a social work degree and I did a public administration degree. And in graduate school, I was like, I'm going to go back into either nonprofit space and, you know, lead an organization as CEO, executive director, or I'm going to go back into the K-12 public school system and ascend to becoming a superintendent. That was the original goal. And I chose social work because I wanted to be, as a leader, grounded, you know, firmly in like the impacts, the social impacts or the environmental impacts on the communities and the populations that I served. So I wanted to be a more connected leader. So that's where the social work came from. I did not have any intention in going the clinical route. I was actually on the macro track. But simultaneously, I was experiencing my own kind of mental health crisis while in
Mm,
graduate school and coming out of a significant relationship that devastated me and just trying to hold all the plates, spin all the plates, and throw up all the balls in the air and keep it going. And I was cracking and I needed
mm,
help, I needed support. And so I had to seek support in the form of therapy and was grateful to find the therapist that I'm still with today. We've been
hey.
rocking for over 5 years, going on 6 years. And it just was really transformational for my own personal journey. So after graduate school, I still kind of lingered. I didn't go straight to therapy. I did some consulting. Then I opened up my own coaching business. And through that was really where I started to understand the transformational experience for both the clinician and the client. And I said, this is where I need to be. This is where I need to live. And this is where I need to focus my efforts. And an impending move from New York to the DMV said, here's an opportunity, like
Go
go
for
all
it.
the way, get licensed. You're already in a transition, do that. And that's how I ended up where I am today.
Man, that was like that's what when you say journeys are not linear, that was ups and downs, but you got there.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. So I know you focus a lot, and are most of your clients LGBTQIA plus? Is that
Yep.
like your primary, or is that
It
just
is.
a
It is my primary population. I'm very fortunate to be in a private practice environment, all Black private practice environment, where I get the opportunity to focus and to really kind of develop a niche, which for me is the Black LGBTQIA plus population. I primarily serve individuals who identify as men,
Mhm.
both in who cisgendered men, so both in their sex at birth, and then also in their gender identity as a man, and all who identify somewhere along the, African diaspora, mostly Black Americans who've had that Black American experience. So this is where we're talking about intersectionality and all that kind of stuff. But I also serve Black trans individuals, and I also serve individuals who are non-gender conforming. So, yeah.
Mhm. Okay. And so what? So with that, What do you seek, or whenever I think of like redefining wellness, we always take in consideration of just seeing what wellness is now and just making sure you're able to redefine it for what fits you. Especially since a lot of people were not considered when wellness was being defined. I'm putting quotes in that because it's arbitrary, but it does matter. So when I tell you or when I ask you redefining wellness in the LGBTQIA plus community, what's like the first thing that comes to mind, or what's a thought process when you hear that statement?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing is wellness is for all.
Mm,
One of the things that the LGBT community is familiar with is exclusion.
mm,
We have been excluded in so many aspects of living and life, including humanity. Like your physical existence is being rejected by individuals. That redefining wellness is actually just including yourself in the
ooh,
worthiness statement around I too deserve to be well. And how I choose to get there, right, is the journey and the path that is going to be unique to my experience, my existence, and to my destination. But wellness is for me if I so choose to engage it, if I so choose to desire it. And so sometimes that message needs to be explicit in our community so that individuals do not see wellness as a privilege or wellness as something that is relegated for a specific population that does not include them. And also the thing about wellness in the queer community is that I would hope that as we do any and everything, we take it and make our own, right?
mm.
The magic and the creativity and the innovation that we possess, and like which makes this world so beautiful and so rich in its culture, is that we get to reclaim things and we make it our own in terms of the things that really resonate with us. We're not a monolith, but there are some similarities in terms of experience and struggle. And and I'd like to think that we are some of the most remarkable individuals walking this planet. So, yeah, that's where I would start with when we're talking about redefining wellness.
And I love that. And is there a if we're thinking about your own personal experience and life journey, is there a example of redefining wellness that you think you had to do or you're currently doing um, that you weren't expecting to, or it's been a little bit harder than you expected?
Yeah, I mean, authenticity.
Mm,
As I stated, for most of us, there is an element of rejection or exclusion that we have derived trauma from.
mhm,
And that can be sustained trauma, or there can be a post, situation in terms of that. But the trauma at some point or currently still exists. And so when I think about my own journey and really defining wellness, it was rooted in me becoming comfortable with my authentic
mm,
self. And that was the hardest thing I had to do because you become so great at hiding it. You
mhm,
become so awesome at, cloaking it and disguising it, rejecting it, suppressing it, right? All of these things, shaming it is the big thing, right?
mm,
So in my wellness journey, I had to really first start to reject the narrative that authentically who I was, and that just wasn't just relegated to my sexual orientation, although that was one of the biggest things
mhm,
for me because, of a lot of different experiences growing up. But even in just how I express myself in terms of redefining masculinity and, or expanding the definition of
I
masculinity,
love
should
that.
I
Yeah.
say, right? Like it includes me crossing my legs, or it includes me showing affection to another man, or it includes me being very emotional at times, or emotive, or whatever the case may be, being soft. It includes me de-escalating situations and not antagonizing situations, right?
Mm,
All of that is an expansive definition of masculinity. So being my authentic self was foundational to me actually beginning to experience real wellness in both my mental and emotional and spiritual state, which then kind of goes outward to everything. So when we talk
Hmm.
about career, when we talk about families and relationships with other interpersonal relationships, when we talk about manifesting things and all of that kind of stuff, like it's all connected,
Yeah, it
and if
is.
you are unwell, it is going to be very hard to maintain a lot of those things that I just mentioned.
Ah, I love that. Similar journey of like authenticity is the hard. I mean, it's something for me, you work on. I work on every day. It's just years of unmasking, right? Peeling back the onions, peeling back the layers, and like you said, it's like you're giving yourself permission to say, "I am worthy for wellness. I am worthy to have this." And I do find it curious how it's still an everyday struggle, but it, like you said, it goes into once you start it, practice it, it permeates into the other areas. So it's easier to talk about work, right? It's easier to talk about your vision because you're clear and authentic 100% of the time, or whatever that percentage looks like. So thank you for giving that piece of that gem. Um, and I'm curious as to, you mentioned intersectionality, and I would love to talk a little bit more about that, especially in the LGBT space, and how does that impact the wellness
Yeah.
in that community, in our community.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about the different identities that are encompassed in this shell of our body, our temple, our spirit, our soul, right? Like there's a lot that goes into it. And there are more salient identities for us as, Black men, especially
Hmm.
brown skinned men, right? Like folks will see the Blackness before they may see the queerness. And
Hmm.
folks may see the Blackness before they see the academic or the artist, right? There are all of these things in terms of who we are, going back to that authenticity or who we aspire to be, that then plays a role in how we may approach wellness or how we may respond to trauma in different ways. I'll use an example in terms of, gender expression and sexual orientation, right? They are not synonymous.
Hmm.
So if a person, say a person who identifies as male, who identifies their gender identity as man, but their gender expression is more, let's say, um, aligned to socially what people may see as effeminate or female characteristics, right? Um, there is this assumption most times that then must make him bisexual, homosexual,
Mm.
or some part of the queer community. And even if that individual has no homophobic um tendencies or anything in their heart towards that, the rejection of their
Mm.
authentic gender expression and then being labeled as something that they don't identify with can be exhausting. It can be traumatizing because you're just trying to be you, right? And contrastly, if you have an individual who may biologically have been, born female, but identifies as a man, or biologically has been born male but identifies as a woman and therefore may identify as trans, or non-gender conforming, like now again we are looking at, you are Black and you are trans, you are Black and you are non-gender conforming, and these two identities alone come with oppressive like
Mm.
forces,
Yeah.
both systemic and communal. And so that intersectionality is important because it in some ways outs us depending on, again, how salient that identity is. And then there's also this ability um to conceal, because it may not be as salient. So people make assumptions about who you are. And because you're not comfortable with expressing really who you are, you go along with those assumptions. And then you begin to develop narratives that are false. about the reality of who you are and it not being acceptable at all because people are making these assumptions because they don't know. Like it's a lot. So that's what I talk about a lot of times when I'm talking about intersectionality with being both Black and then identifying as queer.
Ooh. Yes, there the two forms of oppression. It has it's kind of like mental gymnastics sometimes if you're not comfortable or if you haven't come to terms, or you're just not accepted for who you are, even if you try to be authentic like we've been saying, and it's rejected. That has a, like, no one likes to be rejected.
No.
As humans, you often, many people, and I'll call for myself, you try to limit the amount of times you can be rejected. Some people are more comfortable than others. Everyone has their own threshold of tolerance threshold. But yeah, for the most part, you don't want that. And to feel like the whole world is against you, or a whole community is against you, or even the people that you love are against you, it definitely would take a toll. And I'm curious as to what, if someone did come to you with that, like how do you even start? Like, where do you? I don't know. I don't know where the question is, but like, how do you begin to, I guess, be more comfortable in your skin? Is that, I
Yeah,
don't.
yeah, no, I mean it's and again, it's not, a silver bullet or a broad
Yeah,
stroke
yeah.
approach, but I think there's some core tenets. And for me, one is really kind of confronting and taking stock of behaviors and or you know, coping mechanisms and things that like we have done to survive. Like in order to survive, in order to avoid that deep hurt, pain, or rejection, in order to avoid the violence, in order to remain safe, what have you had to do? What have you had to tell yourself? What have you had to tell other people, right? So it's really just kind of like putting it out on the table for a person to really start to actually articulate things that we may have normalized over time, maladaptive coping mechanisms that like really do not serve us, but at one point were survival tactics and techniques. So if there is a level of suppression, then if there is a level of you know, omission or deceit that may have then formulated into you not being able to actually be honest and open in your interpersonal relationships, which can develop into these self-sabotaging behaviors, right? So
Mhm.
like it has this ripple effect, but at one point that may have saved us, that may
Mhm.
have kept us safe, right? So we start to just kind of put it out all on the table. And then what I do from there with my clients is I'm like, so what is the narrative that drives that behavior? What is the narrative that says you are not worthy or that you are not safe or that you who you are or what you are cannot exist or cannot, here's my one, can't coexist with your, for example, spiritual nature
Mm.
or your worship or like all these kind of things. I have to, because again, I also have the privilege and also some of the trauma from being raised in the church, right? The Black church tradition. So, so then we can, kind of get into that. So we first of all kind of taken account and stock for like, what am I doing? Where am I at? What's happening? Then I'm looking at like, what are the narratives that have driven this behavior? And then we start to actually debunk those narratives, the ones that are false, the ones that are harmful, the ones that, no longer served us or have never served us. But then again, as I stated, may have been what got us through or got us to this point. And we start to really start to infuse facts. We start to infuse new orientations to feelings and emotions, to responses to stimuli out in the world, right? We start to reorientate that so that those narratives no longer are fueled in the way in which they have been fueled. So if I am, maybe I will roll back my what we call sometimes cognitive distortions and using these overgeneralizations. No one likes me. No one will ever accept
Mm.
me. right? That may be something that we need to work on in terms of that narrative to say, listen, there may be a segment of population that does not see me due to ignorance, miseducation, hate, malice that has nothing to do with me. But there are communities out there waiting to embrace me.
Hmm.
That even goes as far as to say there are faith communities out there that honor my full identity, right? In expression. So we have to start then rebuilding these narratives. So then that starts to, right, change behaviors and patterns.
I love that. So I guess we can dive into faith and LGBTQ. How does that play? I would say, I guess, in your personal and then also at work, because I'll share my own experience. But um, what are you? I feel like there's been a trend. I think in general, not even just LGBTQ, but in general, there's been a downward shift or outward shift from like faith organizations or religious organizations to either being agnostic or more spiritual. Um, but I'm curious as to how is that playing out in the LGBTQ space, if you're noticing it from either a personal experience or from work.
I'll say from a personal experience, I am happy to see that there are queer embracing, not queer friendly, but queer embracing, queer celebrating spaces that are headed by queer individuals. Leadership is queer, and parishioners are
Hmm.
predominantly queer. And you see individuals now in spaces and places and houses of worship where they get to see that spiritual
Mm.
self coexist with this humanity. And I think it is important to continue to really highlight that those places exist. Maybe they're not on every corner like your traditional church is, but there are ways in which you can now access it in almost any major city that an individual would live in the age and advent of, technology and streaming, right? An individual may even be able to be connected to the word or the impartation of spiritual practices and principles from a queer perspective in a queer space. I'm seeing other churches that may not, or houses of worship. And let me just preface this by saying I'm not a theologian,
Mm.
so I don't get into the exegesis of the scripture and all that other kind of stuff because I'm not a Bible scholar. But I am a man of faith, and I do have a personal relationship with my God, and my God loves me. So that's the perspective that I come from, and then I also come from the professional perspective and having to walk people through the
Hmm.
traumas from their religious experiences. So I am seeing churches that are not LGBTQIA plus centric, but who are reaching out to the community in various ways. And I'm encouraged by that. I'm inspired by it. And I'm also skeptical in some ways, right?
Mm.
Because sometimes it may feel like what happens with during Black History Month with these corporations. And I don't ever want to um, doubt someone's intention, their
Hmm.
genuine intent. And I also want to acknowledge that there needs to be room for expansion and growth, and we've got to start somewhere. But I do want to just make sure that it is more than lip service, it is more
Hmm.
than performative in terms of their outreach to the LGBTQIA plus population, because the reality is that we have been the drivers of the church for so long. Um, and I think some institutions might have been realizing that people now have other options and don't have to be subjected to the fire and brimstone gays are going to
Trauma.
hell
Hmm.
trauma. No longer do we have to subject ourselves to that. So I will not be participating in your place and space of worship. I will not subject myself to that. And I think some churches may have gotten hip to that and have recognized the
Ah.
loss that they potentially might incur from some prominent and key queer individuals who have made their churches be what they are. I'm, again, I'm cautiously optimistic in terms of as I am seeing churches, and I say this to individuals who seek those spaces. Um, the proof is in the pudding. Like, make sure folks are walking the talk, and make sure, and one of those ways is, if you ascend to a leadership role or aspire to a leadership role in your house of worship, are you met with excuses, and
Mm,
reasons to disqualify you when you have the calling, have the expertise, and have the temperament to, you know execute that space? Or are people looking for ways to usher you in, to support you in that space? That's one of the things that I'm always looking for.
yeah, I love that, and I think it goes back to what you were saying, right? You just want to find a place where you could be authentic, and that's 100% of the time, and you shouldn't have to leave it at the door, for lack of a better term. Um, so I think, and where that comes next is like community, right? And about finding your community, and one thing, or finding your people, finding your family. And I think one of the prominent examples that I'm seeing now, and I love her, is Zaya Wade.
Hmm.
And just anytime I see her and Gabrielle Union and Dwayne Wade, how they just interact, or they just show her love, or they just protect her, it just inspires me. So I would love to hear your aspect or your thought process around like family and the how important that is, or either by choice or by blood,
Yeah.
and how, especially in the Black community, how we can kind of, how we can start doing the work so that that intersectionality piece is a little bit, not all, because we're not broad stroke, but there's a little bit less friction, because there tends to be a little bit of friction sometimes, um, and like how do we start to repair that relationship?
Well, let me just start by saying, my belief is that my community is my currency. It is my
Mhm.
wealth. I am so eternally grateful for my community, because I tell people, like, community literally has saved my life. When I was contemplating suicide, and I called community that was 3,000 miles away, who stayed on the phone with me until community that was 10 minutes away was able to
This
get
thing.
there, and did the
Awesome.
warm handoff, and did the follow up, and and all that kind of stuff. So community is everything. And community, let me just also say that community doesn't mean 150 people know your name or texting you and calling you. It doesn't take all of that. It just really does take individuals who really and truly honor your existence. And they do that through action. They do that in times of crisis and in times of peace, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if we're not connecting when things are well in my life, because you only believe you are, have value when I need something, or vice versa, well,
Mm-hmm.
then, what kind of dynamic is existing here? That's not
Mm-hmm.
the healthy dynamic that I'm searching for, right? So, yes, I say all that to say community is everything to me. And I believe it is the cornerstone. When we talk about healing journeys, one of the things that we are talking about is getting people connected to community. Connection is paramount in, that journey for anyone to their well space. um the other realization is that you come and sit with me at most for 45 minutes to an hour, maybe weekly, maybe bi-weekly, and then you got to go back out into the world. And
Mm-hmm.
Monroe has boundaries, so you ain't calling me at 3 in the morning, or whatever. I might be, sleep or otherwise,
Out.
right? But I'm not available, so developing connections outside of the support that I am providing in the context that I
Mm.
provided is going to be important. Um, I want to address the Gabrielle Union and Dwayne Wade and Zaya Wade. I've heard a few people say, well, it's easy for them because of their affluence. It's
Mm,
easier for them, because she's, not a black girl who is, in the hood and all of that other kind of stuff. And I do not in any way want to erase the realities of being resourced
mhm,
and
mhm,
having those connections and a certain level of protection, or insulation, should I say. What I do want to say is that I think that Gabrielle Union and Dwayne Wade are beautiful models of what any Black parent, auntie, uncle, caring adult in the community can do, which is to affirm a young person's identity, affirm a young person's exploration, affirm a young person's choice, affirm a young person's originality. Like all of these things that I feel like in many instances we have been programmed, and I can talk to that in a moment, to like quench
mm.
or to extinguish, right? There is this, in many instances, this from safety. So, what I said about like, what are these things that you're
Survival.
doing to survive is how do you assimilate versus how do you stand out?
Mm,
So, we are more interested in these communities, a lot of times in our communities, raising individuals who can assimilate, who can blend in,
mm.
versus raising individuals who stand out, raising individuals who create change, raising individuals who are going to have a certain level of resistance that actually drives evolution. Because, and I'm going to go back to that, I like to assume genuine intent, and I know that that's not
Yep.
always the case, but for some, I know it is a fear factor. It is a parent's limiting belief about themselves that they are then imposing upon their child, but it still doesn't make it right because it is damaging, right? And
Hmm.
so when you look at two people like Dwayne Wade, a cisgender heterosexual man who is right in a male dominated sport of basketball, like all of this kind of stuff, all of this testosterone and masculine energy,
She's. Mhm.
right? To be able to see his child and to affirm that child's inner self, to say, this is who I am. And here's the key: to be able to support that child through the evolution of the
Yeah,
discovery of who they
that's
are.
it. Yeah.
I think people get so afraid of like, oh my gosh, like they're going to be this or they're going to be this. And we're trying to script the journey, but we forgot about the thing that you just commented about my intro was, wow, it's not linear.
Hmm.
Our journeys are not linear, and they're not linear for a reason, because we are dynamic in nature.
Hmm.
That is how we are designed. We're dynamic. We are not supposed to be these static individuals. But if you early on start to tell somebody, this is the way, this is how, do not deviate, well, fundamentally, we are
Limited.
extinguishing
Which
something that is the most beautiful thing about humanity.
that I don't even know where to go with that. That's and it's 100% accurate. I think that what comes to mind is like the lack of exploration, the lack of imagination. You're kind of screwed before you even start, right? If you're, I'm thinking even my puppy or my dog, and just saying like, no, you can't do this, you can't do this. After a while, you don't know what they can do or they don't know what they can do because all they know is what they can't do, right? And that's not wellness. That's not a life of live when you know more of what you can't do than what you can. Um, Man, I think I really do appreciate the assimilation versus the standing out or creating change, because between the two, you could tell which one's authentic and which was not, right? They're it, being able to assimilate, is a tool. It's a survival tool, like you said. But is that where the magic happens? Is that where the change happens? Is that where happiness and joy? And I mean, it's not always the positive emotions. There could be rejection, and the standing out, right? There could be hurt. A lot of things come with the standing out piece, but that is where the magic happens. That's where the change happens. And I appreciate the bring out the two, the differentiating between the two, especially in this wellness space. Is there anything that you want, any gems that you want to tell the folks about wellness? Anything that you have to say? What are your thoughts at the moment?
Well, I mean, I think I'll do like a little shameless plug in terms
That
of I was given a vision. Again, I'm constantly on my own journey, and recently there's been a lot of transition, significant transition in my life, and with that comes some pain, with that comes some disappointment and discomfort. But I also believe that it gives an opportunity to kind of blow the doors off of what you thought was going to be the path or trajectory, and you're like, okay, I'm open to what's next. And so through that, I really had this vision of creating and curating space for Black queer individuals to find pathways or to discover pathways and portals to their healing, that really allows for liberated, bold, and beautiful living, right?
yeah,
And so, I created an IG page, and, it's, Black Queer Healing Space. And it's really a space, the vision that is continuing to evolve and to morph. But the original iteration of it, or ideation, is just really creating a space where Black queer folks can have that intersectionality honored, recognized, and responded to, right? Because I think that's another thing. When I was talking about maybe an indication for a space, particularly a house of worship, that is really more than just lip service when it comes to the inclusion and the celebration of the queer community. I'm wondering, how do you respond to my humanity and the intersection of my
mm,
humanity, all of it, right? Because you can say, oh, I see you. You can say, oh, that's nice. But there are some needs, right? There are some desires that might be unique to me as a Black queer individual. And how do you respond? How does your organization, how does your community, right? How does your family respond to some of the unique needs of me being Black and queer? And so that's the idea that I've, really kind of ran with, in terms of really creating an environment, a space where you are seen for your Blackness, you are seen for your queerness, and we'll continue to discover, the other identities that make you who you are. But knowing that those are the two, identities that are um, really responded to in this space. So yeah, so that's new. So hopefully that will become a portal, that will be a
I
place where
like that.
people find community, and also where people begin to discover maybe just that first step into their healing journey, that is not a destination, but will continue to be a journey, will be a lifestyle change, will be a way of life. Those things are my intentions and my hopes for individuals who may encounter this place.
I appreciate that. I will definitely support, and I'll put it in show notes so everyone can see and support as well.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Monroe. I appreciate you taking time out your schedule to speak with us. This was so informative and interesting. So if you want to do any other shameless plugs, feel free.
All right, all
Let
right.
us know where to find you and how to support
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, so again, I'm a licensed master social worker and psychotherapist here in the DMV. So if you're anywhere in Maryland, Virginia, or Washington, D.C., and particularly if you identify as a Black person, and if you identify as queer and you're looking for a therapist, please hit me up. You can go to www.hearts, with an S, plural, hearts in mind counseling.com, hearts in mind counseling.com, and you can access my portal there. Or you can email me at info@monroehoward.com. I try to keep it simple, info@monroehoward.com. And I did a podcast myself called The Naked Truth Experience. So those episodes sit out there in YouTube land. So if you kind of want to check out some of my other ventures in terms of creating content, that's out there. The Naked Truth Experience. And yeah, I'm also available for keynotes and panels. I moderate workshop presentations. Listen, didn't we talk
You
about
too.
it's a hustle?
You all the bags, securing all the bags.
so so
Not
yeah,
mad.
but that's where it's at. But anyway, you can always email me at info@monroehoward.com.
And we will have all that information in the show notes. So if you didn't catch it, it's okay. Just go to the link. Thank you again. And for everyone listening, thank you for picking you today. Bye,
Listen,
y'all.
thank you.